Sorry, my mum's calling me. Can I tell her that I'm busy?
Yeah.
Wait a sec. Hi, Mum. I'm on the phone to Jay for a moment. Do you mind if I call you back later? Bye. So, from what I understand, the structure that we're going for at the moment is that one of us will show the other something that was or has been relevant to us or important to us, something that we have enjoyed or something that we want the other person to see, and we will come on the podcast and discuss it and discuss our thoughts, and we'll also have a central theme so that we can focus and find new insights by looking at one theme.
We'll probably end up going off a little bit because we always do go off on tangents, but it gives us something to come back to, if nothing else.
Yeah. This week we're looking at Spirited Away, which is a 2001 animated fantasy film written and directed by Hayao Miyazaki. I can pronounce Miyazaki, however, I cannot pronounce his first name.
I don't have it in front of me, so...
It was a movie that I saw for the first time when I was 5, but obviously it was your first time seeing it, and it was your first time seeing a Studio Ghibli movie at all, wasn't it?
Yeah, essentially. I've seen little bits, but, yeah, and I've obviously been aware of them as they're just kind of a part of the nerd culture that I'm a part of. Like, I've had a lot of friends in my life who have been anime fans. I've just it's never really clicked with me before. I've not consumed a lot of it, really.
So, what did you know about this movie before watching it? Or what did you expect?
I knew it was very highly rated, and that's pretty much it. Like, and then it was just kind of, to an extent, my expectations were set from other anime which I've watched, which, like I say, is not a lot. But, for example, a show that I watched some of before not really being able to get into was One Piece.
Ooh.
And I feel like that has elements which I would say, as someone who doesn't watch a lot of anime, feel like elements of anime that I don't fully understand, but can, like, point to as being that they're, like, hallmarks of anime.
Yeah. I would not have chosen One Piece for you to watch. I do not rate One Piece at all.
Okay.
But yeah, in regards to back to Spirited Away, I chose this one for you to watch because obviously there was going to be a Studio Ghibli film within this. That I was certain, because to me they're quite important movies. I did have a long think about which one to suggest. It's not my favourite.
Right.
I'll probably mention my favourite at some point. We'll probably do my favourite at some point. However,
sure.
I thought
keep it a mystery.
Yeah. You got to keep the suspense. Keep people listening so that they can find out.
Oh yeah, they're already hooked, I'm sure.
But the reason that I chose Spirited Away was because it's a popular one and a good one.
Yeah.
I think it might have been the first one that I watched. If I watched one before the age of 5, I don't remember it. And objectively, it's seen as good. Like you say, you came in with the expectation that a lot of people like it, and it has that for a reason. And I thought that rather than trying to push my own taste and thoughts about which one is the best, I'd just suggest what is objectively seen as a good one.
Sure, so if I start to, like, argue that, no, I don't think it's great, then you can just be like, well, you're wrong. Like, the public has decided overwhelmingly people like it, so you're wrong.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, lovely. It's good to know where I stand.
Okay, so a bit of a challenge that I'm going to throw out. is, just in case there's anybody listening, and just in case anybody who's listening hasn't watched it before, how would you describe the plot of Spirited Away in one sentence?
No, I can't do it in one sentence. That's not fair. You need to let this breathe, because it's gonna be difficult. Okay, I will try to describe it full stop, and then you will try to describe it in one sentence.
Okay.
Because I think you will struggle.
Should we do a timer?
No. I need to be given time. Okay. So, Spirited Away is the story of... You're going to say her name now.
Chihiro.
Chihiro, thank you. It's the story of Chihiro, who's a young girl who walks into kind of a fantasy land with her parents, and then her parents are turned into pigs, and then there's this weird bathhouse where spirits visit that she gets roped into working in order for the leader of the bathhouse to not realise that she's human, and God knows what's going to happen to her. I don't know that we ever get told really what's going to happen. She'll probably get turned into a pig. And she is told to work in the bathhouse by a boy who ends up being a dragon, and there's river gods and... Well, no, they're river dragons, aren't they? No, river gods, river dragons, and there's a character called No Face who eats people and just wants to give her gold, but she doesn't want the gold. And then she goes and finds the bathhouse owner's sister, who... I don't even know what happens then. I can't even remember what happens at the end. She goes and sees the bathhouse sister and returns the stolen stamp or something to the bathhouse owner's sister. And then she goes back and confronts the bathhouse owner and says that her parents aren't any of the pigs. And then her parents are on the other side of the river, and she goes and meets up with her parents again. And at the beginning of the film, she's afraid. And at the end of the film, she's not afraid.
Well done!
That was such a good explanation.
It was a good explanation for someone who's never watched it before.
Yeah, sure, thank you. I think that's very generous.
So for anybody who perhaps needed a clear view just in case, even though I think that your explanation was brilliant.
Expert.
Spirited Away is the story of 10-year-old Chihiro, who enters the world of the spirits, known as kami in Japanese, by accident. Her parents are turned into pigs when they get greedy and eat a whole bunch of the spirits' food. And she has to work, as you said, for the witch Yubaba, who runs a bathhouse for the spirits. Her name is changed to Sen, and she has to work there and face a whole bunch of different scary obstacles in order to escape. So overall, did you enjoy the movie?
I enjoyed it. I did enjoy it. I still don't know why it's one of the best rated movies of all time. Maybe you can help me understand that. Right now I don't know what makes it one of the best rated films of all time. Change my mind.
Okay. Was there anything that immediately came to your mind, or any notes that you particularly made when looking at it through the theme of fear?
I feel like she gets over her fear quite quickly. Like, it's quite a shift. Because at the beginning, she's very afraid of kind of nothing. Like, they want to go into this tunnel. The dad wants to go into the tunnel, and the mum's like, oh, fine, we'll go with it. And she's, like, really afraid to go into this tunnel for kind of no good reason. But then she seems to get over that really quite quickly. Maybe it's a thing of I don't see time passing, because she's then also afraid when she goes into the boiler man. She's still quite afraid at that point, and then when she gets signed up, she's still fairly afraid. It's when, I think, Haku flies in and he's injured and he's being attacked by the paper birds. And she seems to really, like, just go for it at that point. Like, she seems to be not afraid at all, and she runs across a drain pipe. Like, it seems to go from, like, 0 to 100. Or, like, 100 to 0. Like, she seems to be really, like, insanely afraid at the beginning. Which, fair enough, she's a kid. But then it seems to go to nothing quite quickly for me. But I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
Okay, so let's first of all talk about Chihiro. So Spirited is meant to be a coming-of-age story about a young girl who starts off, like you say, very afraid, and then learns how to be brave. And it gets compared to Alice in Wonderland a lot.
Yeah, I've seen that.
It's the type of story in which a character is just thrown obstacle after obstacle after obstacle, you know? And she just keeps having to face up to the new challenge. Now, my immediate thought when watching this, and like you say at the beginning, a lot of the criticism when this movie first came out was about Chihiro and how whiny and how much of a scaredy cat she is. However, through looking at the theme of fear, my thoughts were about how in tuned children are with the world. That they are often seen as scared about things, but they are actually just more aware of their surroundings because they're new to the world and because they're quite vulnerable and they have to be more in tune with what's going on around them than adults do.
Yeah, and they're skeptical of everything.
Exactly. And that's simultaneously a good thing and a bad thing because she is whiny and she is a bit of a scaredy cat, but also she's right, you know?
Yeah.
Her parents go in very oblivious and she is right to be skeptical and right to not want to go into the theme park. Something I have recollected about other Studio Ghibli movies is they do seem to have this theme of when they include spirits, the children are more aware of them than adults are.
Right.
And in some movies, that's, you know, you've got really happy, jolly spirits, and in this one, it's not, you know? And
I mean, they're not evil.
They're not evil, but I wouldn't say...
Most of them.
Most of them. But I wouldn't say that this is a happy, clappy story. So yeah, what do you think about children perhaps being more in tune with fear and with what's going on around them? So more in tune with the world, which means that they're more fearful than adults.
I think for me, her being rightfully afraid in this story plays more into the necessity in films and media aimed at children to make the children right. Mm. And I think it kind of serves that dual purpose because it both means that we as the audience connect with her because we know that she's right and you like your protagonist to be right, and it means that you feel for her a lot more and connect with her even if she is whiny. It also serves the second purpose of setting up her story of being very afraid at the beginning and being less afraid at the end.
Yeah.
In terms of children being more aware of the world around them, I don't know how much I agree with it. I think to an extent I agree, and I don't know, maybe it's this. Maybe I don't think children are more in tune to the world around them, but children notice different things to adults.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the time that comes down to adults knowing the things that they need to notice or feel that they need to notice, and kids will notice anything.
Yeah.
And can latch on to anything.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of plays into the story as well, is that she gets dragged into the spirit world and she just kind of goes with it.
Yeah.
Where an adult might not. And maybe you can get away with pushing the story forward a little bit more when it's a kid because you don't need to explain it. It's just like, oh, okay, we're in the spirit world now.
Yeah. Do you know, it reminded me of something that happened to me when I was about 12.
Right. So... looking forward to this story.
So, obviously when we were around that age was when Madame McCann disappeared. She disappeared in 2005, I think, when we were about 9 or 10. And so there'd been a lot of, like, I don't know about your school, but in my school there'd been a lot of, like, fear-mongering and a lot of, like, don't do this, don't do that, la 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 la.
Right, okay. I didn't have that, but sure, let's go with it.
Anyway, when I was 12, I went to Hong Kong with my mum, my aunt, and my little sister. And we were in a marketplace, and my mum and my aunt wanted discount handbags or something like that. And a guy said, yeah, sure, I have loads. Come into this basement. So we went into this shady market. We went down like so many basements, and when we got there, he offered us sweets, like not labeled sweets. And anyway, my mum got the handbags. We came out, and I just instantly took the sweets from my hand and threw them in the bin. And my mum said,
Right.
"Why didn't you eat your sweets?" And I said I was worried that they were drugs and they were going to have drugged us. And when my mum says this story, she says, "Oh my God, it was something I hadn't considered. And, like, it could have landed us in so much..." Like, my mum, my aunt, my sister, all just ate the sweets. And so, yeah, last night when I was watching it, I was reminded of that scenario. So, it did strike me how many fears and obstacles she has to overcome.
Right.
I was watching it with my partner, and he pointed out some common fears that she has to face, such as heights with the stairs, fire with the boiler room, arachnophobia with the boiler man having that many arms, etc., etc.
Yeah.
However, I'd argue that there are 2 to 3 major things to fear in the world of the spirits, and I wonder if you agree with me or if there's any that you would think to add.
Right.
So, the first is fear of loss of identity. So, in regards to that, there's Chihiro immediately having to deal with potentially losing her physical form.
Yeah.
There's losing her name. There's being dehumanized in the workforce. And the constant threat of being physically silenced by Yubaba. So, there's a couple of times where first of all, she zips her mouth shut. There's a couple of times where she's threatened with having her voice taken away, and also the threat of being turned into a pig or being turned into coal. Like, being turned into a pig or being turned into coal doesn't make you lose sentience. It means that you don't have a voice, and that you don't have an identity as a human. And, like, Chihiro forgets her name so quickly. She gets told that her new name is Sen by Yubaba, and pretty much by, like, a couple of scenes later, she's already forgotten that her name was Chihiro. Which is pretty scary.
Yeah.
And with regards to that, I think that Haku shows us, like, what happens when that fear becomes a reality. So, he's forgotten his name, he's quite cold, he's quite detached, he's disliked by everybody because he's Yubaba's apprentice. Even though he helps Chihiro, he's not exactly got his own freedom or free will. The second fear that I put was the fear of duplicity.
Right.
So, most characters have 2 sides to them. Haku is kind, and then he's cold. Lin is mean, and then she turns out to be kind. Yubaba and Zeniba, her sister...
Granny.
Yeah, Granny, are identical and yet have 2 completely different personalities. And that within the world of the spirits, there's this fear of who to trust and who is going to exploit you.
Yeah.
And that part of growing up is figuring out which adults to trust and which adults not to trust. And then finally, I thought that there was this interesting... I could think of 3 instances, though I'd like you to help me figure out how this links to fear, but this was something I noticed. So there is this link between parents and identity, in the sense that Chihiro becomes separated from her parents, and there's this constant tension on if she'll be able to recognise her. Like, that's the penultimate part of the film, about whether she'll be able to recognise them. Meanwhile, Yubaba is separated from her baby when he gets transformed into the mouse.
Right.
And she doesn't recognise him when she first sees him. And when Haku comes and says to her that something precious to her has been replaced, she instantly goes to the gold, and it takes her a good while for her to realise that it's her own child.
Right.
Once she's figured out it's her child, she is furious and hysterical, but she didn't recognise that her own child had been replaced. And another little Easter egg, I don't know how much you'll remember this, but the scene where Chihiro is on the train towards Granny's, there's a whole bunch of shadowy figures. I have read in a number of different places that these shadowy figures are supposed to be humans that are moving on to the other life.
Sure.
And that all of the figures are elderly, except one, and that is when they move away from the station, there is a little girl who is not moving on, but is instead waiting. And the theory is that she is waiting for her parents to come and join her before she moves on.
Right.
Which is depressing as all hell.
Yeah, just a bit.
But I don't know, how could we kind of link that to fear, that separation from parents and whether your parents will recognise you, etc.?
I feel like I might be, reaching, but you can maybe say that's just a part of a coming of age story. And so that fear plays into that because it's the almost a fear of growing up.
Yeah.
It's a fear of not having your parents, having to do everything on your own.
Yeah, I think it's that. Did you ever get scared of becoming lost or getting lost as a kid?
I don't know. I think I was not good at doing things on my own. That just came from a lack of confidence, though. I'm guessing you did.
Well, I feel as though when we went out and about places, I would be scared that I'd get lost. And I think that maybe this is just me, but I feel as though one of the things that I used to fear about being lost is that people would forget about me or would forget to look for me. That's really sad when you say it. But if I'd gone missing, people would have noticed that I was gone. But it's that irrational childhood fear that if suddenly, you were to disappear in the shopping centre, your parents would go home and forget.
And not notice,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wonder if it kind of plays into that fear, because, this is essentially a movie made for children. And it plays into that fear of forgetting, when you grow up and you and your parents become more and more separated, that you become unable to recognise each other. Or maybe that's just stretching.
I don't know. So much of analysis is stretching, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think there's something there in the final challenge, which is a trick, but the final challenge being having to recognise her parents, and that's kind of set up at the beginning that Haku says, make sure you remember them so that you can recognise them later.
And she has that nightmare where she can't recognise them.
Yes, I'd forgotten about that, yeah.
No.
Which I think, I was just going to take it off in a completely different direction, maybe just ties into fear of losing safety.
Yeah. Because
it's not only her parents, it's her life. If she don't recognise her parents, that's her life gone.
Yeah.
Even though it's a life that was going in a direction she didn't want, she was moving away from home and she wasn't happy about that. It's that safety. It's, I think, a lot of what parents represent. And so her fear of not recognising them is her fear of not being safe. Again, if she can recognise them, if she can have her parents back, she's safe again.
Yeah.
And until that time, she's not safe anymore.
Yeah.
There's not that protection.
I definitely think there's something to that, because I gotta say, although I recognise that the spirit world is dangerous for her and that she'd want to get back to the human world, those parents are horrible.
Yeah, they're not great.
There were parts of it where I was like, don't bother saving them. They were not great parents to you.
Yeah. They weren't awful, but it was just the dad just was not concerned about her fear at all.
No. The next thing I wanted to discuss was something that's not obvious on first viewing, but accordingly, Miyazaki wanted to highlight the Japanese fear at the time of being overtaken by the Western world.
Right.
This is shown through the father's outfit, which is a very polo shirt. He's driving an Audi car.
Yeah.
And he immediately starts talking about how he's got cards and cash in order to deal with problems. And that's a very Western way of looking at things.
Right.
This is also portrayed through the fact that while the movie itself is very traditional Japanese, Yubaba's clothes and her decor in her court of the bathhouse is very Western, or at least a portrayal of traditional Victorian Western.
Right.
And obviously as the primary antagonist, that is supposed to be, or at least what I've read, that's what it's supposed to represent.
Right.
Which I did find really interesting. There was this interview in which Miyazaki said that he wanted to show a more traditional Japanese world. So the spirit world is based on Japanese Shinto Buddhism. The kami, or the spirits, were a big part of the Japanese religion, that spirits resided in essentially like all living things.
Right.
Such as rivers and trees and forests, mountains. There'd be guardians of them, etc. And Miyazaki said that in modern day, people don't generally believe in them, and that he kind of wanted to show a nostalgia for the past in the face of the antagonist of the Western world taking over. Yeah. But he also wanted to show that that world isn't perfect. The idea being that it's scary with its rules and its unpredictability, but also it's a lot simpler. So there's that, which is something I definitely did not pick up on as a kid. But once I read about it, and
that would be impressive.
Yeah. Me at 5 years old, like, this represents how the Western world has taken over Japan's cultural identity. But is there anything you wanted to add on that?
Yeah, I think a part in the film which I recognise almost took me out of the film a little bit was obviously the river spirit comes in as a stink spirit. Is it stink spirit? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so she obviously cleans him, and then he's got the thorn in his side that they will have to pull out. And then they pull it out, and it's a bike, and then there's a whole bunch of rubbish comes out, which seems a very on-the-nose criticism of pollution.
Yeah. All Ghibli films have that.
Oh, do they?
I say all, but most Ghibli movies will have an environmental message in there.
Right, okay.
So, yes, in regards to Spirited Away, it comes through how humans have dealt with nature has affected the spirit world. So it's affected the river spirit that comes to visit through littering. It's affected Haku because they've built apartments over the river he once was.
Right, yeah.
And that a lot of these spirits need to be cleansed or cleaned because humans aren't treating the natural world and therefore the spirits in a good way.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think I've maybe drawn a line where there was a different line to be drawn. Or a different point that I didn't know about. But no, I was just going to suggest that felt almost like a, not necessarily even Western world, but like a modern world destroying tradition.
Yeah.
I guess.
Definitely. I will say that the twist of Chihiro having fallen in Haku as a river as a child does come out a bit out left field. It's foreshadowed a bit when she is with the river spirit that visits, and she kind of has that flash of being underwater.
Yeah.
However, it does come a bit out of nowhere.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. I think you're right. However, I think it's very difficult to pinpoint one thing in this film that comes out of nowhere. Because when I was talking about things that I see as almost stereotypical of anime, that is almost the thing that I see as stereotypical of anime. Things just kind of coming out of nowhere. We just kind of have to accept them. But no, I do agree. The other thing is that apparently they love each other.
Yeah.
Which feels like, okay, they don't really know each other. He saved her, sure, and then he just kind of left her alone. It first becomes apparent really because the length she goes to save him anyway, like, sure, he saved her, but, like, she goes really out on a limb to save his life when she doesn't really know him, and then she loves him, and then that's what actually saves him is the fact that she loves him. And that felt a little bit like, And they kind of explain that away with the fact that they had this deeper connection and they've known each other for a long time because she fell in him as a child. But no, I don't buy that. Oh no, it hit the nerve of love out of nowhere, which I'm not a fan of.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. It's one of those things that I think I probably would have agreed with you if I'd been watching it for the first time as an adult. Well, because like as a child you just accept it, and then as you're growing up, the more you watch it, obviously, the more, because you know it's coming,
Yeah.
You just kind of get the feeling of it throughout.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, but like, I accept that criticism.
Yeah, I think, I mean, definitely when you say that and I think about all the films that I watched as a kid, that you just kind of let things go.
Yeah.
You don't notice them as a kid, and then when you're watching it back, it doesn't matter because what you're getting is the nostalgia.
Yes.
So you can't let those things go.
Yeah. Okay, so that's kind of all I've noted down. I feel like at this point, we'd probably do credits or something like that.
Thank you for listening. If you want to get in contact with us, you can do so at our website, nostalgiasperspective.co.uk, or email us at nostalgiasperspective@gmail.com, or if you're listening to this on YouTube, just leave us a comment down below. We're new to this and we're learning every day, so any feedback you can give us would be really appreciated. Our next episode will be coming out this time next month and will be on one of my favourite movies, 500 Days of Summer.